can I just say that this is like the worst Pokemon starter deck I think I have ever seen? It's terrible compared to the one I did for my like discussion on how Pokemon sells its deck. That one was actually kind of good. It had like the Nido Queen with the really good support effect, but this deck is just terrible. It has absolutely no useful Pokemon in it. I mean, it has like some clear industry standard cards like Metal Saucer and Professor's Research. I'm glad they standardized the Professor card, the dump hand draw 7 card, but everything else here is just a joke. I mean, it has Galarian Berserker, but not the good one. It has the bad one. The good one actually has an effect where it increases damage steel type do, which would be nice in this kind of deck, but I guess we just cannot have nice things. Although we do get a full playset of Hop. That's right, you can get mansplained to about type matchups up to 4 times per game. Aren't you lucky? Anyway, let's talk about some of the feedback I've been getting on the video. First of all, a lot of people have been asking what was the game I had set up next to me. That's my B. It's a game called Crossmaster. It's a game based on the MMO Wakfu, which you've probably more likely heard of through the cartoon, although you should probably hear about it more from the Dofus cartoon, which is this game's predecessor, because the Dofus cartoon is actually creative, hence why I have Joris up over here. Anyway, it's a miniature-style board game. It's a very intricate miniatures game that's basically built like a board game. And one thing that's really cool about it is it translates the rules from Dofus/Wakfu basically directly into board game form, which isn't that hard to do. Wakfu is already like a turn-based board game styled MMO, so it doesn't really take much to translate it into Crossmaster Arena. I don't know if Crossmaster Arena is really supported anymore. The miniatures were they were reasonable. It was like a set of 4 for like $20 to $30, I think. It did have some trouble early on because they introduced some really powerful characters as sort of a promo bundle, but I actually had a little strategy I called the Hurt Box. You use this character here who comes in the starter. What she can do is she can make herself swap places with one opponent. So you just walk up to their most powerful guy, grab him, and throw him in the Hurt Locker, where he just gets, savagely beaten by all of your other characters. He can't move away, he can't run. He's just, pain time. Although this is a good thing to segue into the first and obvious question: am I going to do a 7 deadly sins of board games? No. This is because I do not have nearly the depth of experience with board games as I do with card games. I own cards from like 100 different games, and those cards take up maybe about the same amount of space in my house as like 10 decently sized board games, so that's one of the reasons why I have that. I have played card games that a lot of you have probably never heard of. Like, I don't know how many of you have heard of the game Humalians. I have perhaps way too many cards for that game. But as for board games, unless you count Crossmaster, probably the most esoteric one I've played has been Pandemic. Ooh. in that serious. Oh no, I probably just got myself demonetized by saying that, didn't I? But yeah, there's one sin left. I'm trying to debate the best way to approach it. It's not having reminder text. This is all about making your game accessible and easy to learn for new players. A lot of people can forget that when you've played your own game long enough. Making sense of how to play it comes naturally to you, but it doesn't really to other players. But that's not going to be where I plan on ending just my talk on trading card games in general. It's been I'm thankful that it's gotten a lot of attention. It's not where I'm ending. I mean, there are certainly a lot of card games I can talk about. There are other game mechanics. Like there's ones that are like more of a mixed bag, like any card as resource is more of a mixed bag than it is a sin. So that's probably something I'm going to talk about. I do have to at least do one serious video on Duel Masters before I'm done. But yeah, I'm definitely going to make more of that. Although one thing that some people mentioned is that I did not bring up Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Rule 4. Now, this was specifically in reference to concept of making it so that you have to build a board where the relative position of cards matters a whole bunch. Master Rule 4 is the set of rules they came out with to handle link monsters, which are the monsters that they're basically like Xyz or Synchro monsters, but even more abusable. But what they did was in Master Rule 4, they introduced something called the Extra Monster Zone, which are 2 zones above the 2nd and 4th monster zones. Let's see if I can get a good view of that. I'm gonna have to obstruct my field here. But these are fields that not only matter because link monsters have these little arrows that they point to that can have an effect on other cards if they're pointing to those arrows. But it's also, at least as far as Master Rule 4 goes, the only location where you are allowed to summon monsters from your extra deck. Originally, you could put them anywhere in the monster zone. And what this did was, there were some cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That involved the placement of cards relative to one another, but those were, like, a handful of gimmick cards that I don't think anybody, like, seriously used. But the addition of Link monsters changed that to a serious, hardcore, and mandatory function of the game. It used to be, you know, you got 5 monster slots, you got 5 spell slots, as long as you have, like, the 2 clearly defined rows and don't put, you know, more than 5 into either of those with a field card set to the side, then you're good. There was also the pendulum thing, which was something that used to go on the outside. Now you actually have to dedicate spell slots to it. That was another change they made. But people were asking me, does Master Rule 4 count as... darn it, Keyforge, you just have to be the center of attention everywhere, don't you? Ask me... I'm going to leave you down. Ask me, does Master Rule 4 count as one of these sorts of boards? And I'd say it probably doesn't. It is certainly a change for Yu-Gi-Oh! But one thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Yu-Gi-Oh! Has had nearly 20 years of accretion, of new rules, of new concepts. This was probably a bit gimmickier. They needed something to top Xyz, which were basically easier synchros. And this is what they came up with. But the thing is only a couple of spots matter relative to your opponent's cards now, and it can be easily set up in other ways. There's actually something called the field center card, which you just plunk that down and say, okay, that's the center of the field. To the right and the left of these are the extra zones, and of course the center row. It's about as easy a thing to set up as bocce. How do you set up a game of bocce? You chuck a ball a few feet away. But if it takes, like, if the physical locations of cards relative to each other takes less time to set up than, or about as much effort to set up as a game of bocce, then you're probably good. Like, it's similar to Chaotic and, like, Bakugan. You can shambles it together. You don't need, like, a strict card playmat or anything. You just need something to designate the center of the board. I could use Joris here in place of a field center card. So it is something that involves cards in relative position to each other, but it is not the same as building a board for cards to move on. You don't really move cards around like pawn pieces on Yu-Gi-Oh! First of all. Another thing that some people brought up was I was talking about skill challenge games. People mentioned that one problem with these is, of course, physical disability. And yeah, that's a fair point. Might be. I kind of miss that. People who you know, have poor motor control, or maybe are missing a limb or something, something that would affect their ability to play these games, might not have the same kind of fun when these people can play trading card games easily because they don't require that same level of input. And let me tell you something, I get it. I've mentioned this in my video on Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, the last video I made with that horrible hissing microphone, mentioning that I have dysgraphia, which makes playing first-person shooter games or games that require like pinpoint frame-perfect accuracy a huge pain in the butt. It takes me like twice as long I have to practice something twice as hard in order to figure it out. Anything like, you know, like my writing, I have the writing of a friggin' third grader. But I still like these. Like I said, they appeal more to kids, but I personally enjoy these kinds of games, and I'm saying that as a grown man with a motor disability. Although, like I said in that video, it's like dipping my toe into the shallow end of motor disability. I can still do most things, but let me tell you what, gyro aiming, where I could aim with my wrist instead of having to do like little precise inputs with my fingers, was a godsend. But finally, yes, I've had an open invitation to review trading card games for a long time. That invitation is still open. However, I have found that 9 times out of 10, the corrections I've been sending people have just been basic issues with formatting on their rule books. A lot of people, their rule books are kind of a mess, and you can't like submit a newspaper article or submit a book with improper format. You can't, for example, submit a news article that has the title halfway through the writing. You can't do that. So I've told this to a lot of people in my response emails, but I guess I'll say it here. So this is the mindset that you should probably use when putting your rulebook together. So a couple of guys, they've just acquired your game and are super excited to play it. They've ripped off the cellophane and opened the box. One of them picks up the rulebook and starts to read aloud, while the other one, an energetic guy, he starts to mess around with the contents of the box. Your goal is to get these two idiots playing your game before they break something or hurt themselves. So what needs to happen is how your rulebook is structured is that you need to give the players the rules as they are needed. There are a lot of rulebooks that are dedicated more to trying to simulate the flow of the game, or that just do that naturally, but they don't really translate well to rules to learn with. And the most obvious is, what rule do these players need first? The first rule that they need is how to win. They need to know how to win the game. I've been sent a number of rule books where the rules on how to win, the objective is like somewhere buried deep in the rules. So I start reading, I'm reading things about, like mana steps and character cards, and I'm like, what does this have to do with anything? Because here's the thing about having the rules to win, why leading off with that is important, because it is the crux around which all of your other rules will find context. You see these other things in the rules, is like, okay, that's how this contributes to me winning, that's how this contributes to me winning, and you can see it in any competently written rule book. The first thing they say is how to win. Like, let's see, we got Dragon Ball Super, I got a number here, so Dragon Ball Super, number 1, introduction, number 2, how to win. Let me see. NFL Rush Zone, maybe not a good game, but how to win a game. Even bad games get it right. Monopoly as a board game is a bit different, although this mindset works for board games too. First thing, set it up. Step 2, how to win. Dragonborn, open the rulebook. First thing, objective of the game. So telling your players how to win the game is the most important thing you have to do first. The thing you should follow that up with are, these are where you put things like the contents of the box, or the setup diagrams, or instructions on how to read a card. It shouldn't be like a super in-depth talk about the contents of the box. You won't want to put deck lists there or anything. You either want to put those on the back of the box or in the back of the book. But this is so that the guy who's taking the stuff out of the box on the other end, he's like, okay, that's this, that's this, that's this. He's keeping these things organized rather than throwing stuff everywhere and making a mess. And then, you do the rules for setup, and the guy who's playing with the stuff in the box is like, okay, so you get this, and I get this, and you get that. And then you're all set up and ready to go for your first turn. I mean, the guy playing with the box probably has the lid on his head as a hat right now, but hey, you've made progress. So the thing you want to follow up with next after setup is a step-by-step guide. Here's a good example from Dragonborn. A step-by-step guide on how a turn will play out. It needs to be concise. It needs to fit on one page. And might even be a good idea to print it on the back of your rulebook, because this is the thing that the players are going to visit most, is figuring out that turn sequence. A lot of games have very different turn sequences, so keeping that in a place that's easy to spot is really important. And what you do is, on that list, you then have next to each step, you have page numbers that players can flip to learn more of the specifics. It's like, okay, after I've played a monster, I want to fight with it, so let's flip to that page that tells us how battle works. It's, again, giving players the instructions they need at the pace that they need them, as they are needed. So, hey, there you go. That should have your players going. Make sure that your rules are given this proper format before you send them to me, please. Otherwise, I'm just going to email you back and say, hey, fix your formatting. But yeah, that's you can take a look at a lot of other rule books. Like I said, Monopoly does it. Well, Crossmaster is actually a bit different. Crossmaster is actually got kind of a cool rule book, which I think I'll explain to you. It doesn't actually say how to win right away, because what it does is, I mean, it has the table of contents, it has lore. Before you put winning, you can maybe put the box contents. Monopoly puts their setup before the objective. You can put a few lines of lore before the objective, but it needs to come up really quick. This one, Ankama, has a list of items, including a way to read the figures. But the cool thing that Crossmaster does is it has playable rules learning. You actually set down the book and you play a game using the book as the field and following the instructions. So it actually has like an interactive rule book so that you learn the game. Although, again, when they tell you on each section, the first thing they say is aim of the game, how to win. Like I said, this is cool. I don't know how many other games have rule books like this, but this is neat. Crossmaster has all sorts of neat stuff with their game. Like, the individual booster packs actually contain, like, solo player maps. I haven't seen that in a lot of other games. I mean, there's that weird Marvel game they put out that has, like, a solo player setting. But what it does is it's a map that you're supposed to figure out how to navigate and win in a limited number of turns. It's a great way to learn how character abilities can work. It's more like a puzzle game rather than a miniatures game. Crossmaster is great. If you can find a set of it, I think some stores probably still have them around, even if it's not really receiving the massive support it does. Although on the back of the book, there it is, the sequence of game turns. Although it also has a bunch of other notes and things that are frequently noticed upon. Although Pokemon, they also have on the playmat itself. I don't think the Yu-Gi-Oh one does it? But the Pokemon playmat actually has, yeah, the Yu-Gi-Oh one doesn't. But the Pokemon playmats actually tend to have the turn order and the status effects, various things that come up frequently on the game mat, and those are things that you should include in either on its single page, a single 2-page spread, or printed on the back. Things that players will be able to like quickly consult at a time, because it's about ease of learning. And I'm going to try to go into that on Sin number 7. If you have any questions about Sin number 7, like I said, I'm debating whether it should be one about proper rule writing, because saying that your game has no reminder text is kind of obvious. Yeah, I'll say what I can here. Something to keep in mind is you will not always be there to explain your game to people. You will be there for like beta testers if they're playing live, or if they email you or something like that. You'll be able to say, oh yeah, that goes like this. If you're getting that question a lot while people are reading your rulebook, you might want to clarify that in the rules a bit. A lot of games have like an FAQ section in the back to tell you how these specific interactions work. You won't always be there to explain things to people. You won't always be at conventions showing people how to play these games. People won't always be in a position where they can go to YouTube to watch a video of other people playing the game. A lot of people, they just want to play the game, and if they have to like do homework on how to play it, they might, get bored and drop it, or all the parts might get jumbled together into a huge mess. You saw my Doom board game about how everything is in individual plastic baggies, and that's to prevent that. Although that's like a family habit. Like, my lunch money would come in one of those little Ziploc bags every day. My aunt, when I left a pair of my boxer shorts at her house, she put it into one of those little bags before putting it in the envelope to mail it to me. I'm sorry, Connie, it'll never happen again. But, yeah, I'm probably going to focus on getting a Halloween episode together first, while I figure out the direction. It's not going to be the end of my talks on trading card games. I've talked about trading card games way before I did 7 Deadly Sins. This is just kind of my first big breakout success, and I hope to do more with it in the future. So, yeah, that's a look at some of the stuff, and until next time, this is Kodak signing off.